biointelligence, applications of generative AI in healthcare and biotech. I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Tamaseb. I'm a general partner at DCVC. DCVC is a Silicon Valley-based venture capital firm. We invested about $4 billion at the intersection of AI and deep tech. That includes lots of companies in the healthcare, biotech, and diagnostic space. I'm also author of Super Founders, a book about startup founders and what makes them successful. But today, it's all about these three gentlemen. We will talk about from basically hype to reality. Is this the time where AI has actually been deployed in healthcare, biotech, pharma, and diagnostics? So I will go through the panel. Munjal is co-founder and CEO of Hippocratic AI. They use generative AI for healthcare delivery. Alex of Insilico Medicine, they use generative AI to design new molecules and biologics. And Mahyar, co-founder and CTO of Deepcell, and the applications of tools, AI in tools and cell diagnostics. So with that, I think everyone in the panel, I'd love for you to go a couple of minutes, talk about the genesis of your company, what the company does, and where AI comes into play, and then we'll get into the meat of the questions.
So I'm Munjal Shah. Hippocratic AI, we started the company actually in like March of 23. So we saw ChatGPT, and honestly, as a person who had studied AI and built 2 AI companies and then built a healthcare company, I said, oh, wow, we finally have AI that works. And so it's time to start a company around this. And so we started Hippocratic. What we do is we provide healthcare AI agents that operate predominantly within the scope of nursing, reaching out to patients, talking to them on the phone, doing care activities. And we sell them to health systems, to payers, which are insurance companies in the US, and to pharma. And so that's the company. We're based in Silicon Valley. We've raised about $270 million in the last 24 months.
Alex Aliper, president of Insilico. We're a global biotechnology company. We discover new drugs, new medicines against aging-related disorders, cancer, fibrosis, metabolism disorders. And we developed a platform, generative AI platform, that helps us discover drugs more efficiently and faster. So currently, traditional pharma spends billions and over a decade to get a single molecule on the market. We want to change that paradigm because we need more medicines fast. And we have been able to demonstrate that we can shorten the time frame for drug discovery 3 times. So threefold. Instead of 5 years, we're doing it in 18 months. And we're doing it at a fraction of the cost. So currently, we have 30 drug discovery programs. 10 of them are in clinic, phase 1, phase 2. And our recent phase 2 study in lung fibrosis have just been published in Nature Medicine, where we showed efficacy in patients with IPF, lung fibrosis. And it's the first case where AI-discovered molecule has shown efficacy in real human patients. So yeah, that's our business model, platform and pipeline.
Perfect.
And I'm Mahyar Salek. I'm co-founder and CTO of a company called Deepcell. If you think about, well, we're an iteration over a microscope. If you think about microscope as an eye, we are an eye that is empowered by brain, tells us like what you see, and an arm that tells you like, well, if you see something that's interesting, you could actually take it out. So you could actuate on that. So that's the Deepcell product. We empower biopharma companies understand like how drugs affect their the underlying cell samples. We empower diagnostic applications, clinical applications, and we've recently commercialized globally.
Perfect. So first question, what I want to understand is, what did you have to invent off the shelf that was basically not off the shelf, right? What did you have to build yourselves in this time of AI that there's lots of companies with lots of products of AI out there that already exists?
Yeah, you know, the primary challenge of what we're building is, one, it has to be extremely safe. Like, even a nurse talking to a patient on the phone can kill them if they tell them to take ibuprofen and they have chronic kidney disease, stage 3 or 4. And we couldn't have the AI mostly get that right. It has to never recommend ibuprofen to a CKD 3-4 patient 100% of the time. The second issue we had was we realized that voice was the only way to truly connote you care. The empathy and emotion you can feel in voice is quite different. In fact, part of our thesis was that there's a voice renaissance coming, that it's such a natural, emotional way to communicate with patients that that's how we're going to do it. But you have a very small latency budget when you talk about voice. In fact, you look at all the models that have been improving lately, from DeepSeek onward to the latest Gemini 2.5, they've done it by increasing latency. In fact, so much so you can't use them for voice. Like you have to get an answer in 500 milliseconds for voice. So we had to work on a whole host of new technologies to allow you to make a smart, safe AI that answers in less than 500 milliseconds from the LLM standpoint. And we did that with a unique architecture. So we came out with a new unique architecture we call the constellation model, where it's 22 models working together. We came out with a new way to actually do inference that speeds up inference time of especially large, dense models to ensure we can meet that 500 millisecond limit, including a very novel thing we call vertical quantization. And on top of all that, we had to come up with a clinical validation system on the back end, because nobody tests the output of LLMs. They say, oh, my LLM's safe, this is what I trained it on. I'm like, how do you know? Have you seen PubMed GPT? Trained only on PubMed, high quality content, still make stuff up all the time. And so we actually are the only ones where we hired 6,000 nurses to do 300,000 test calls to the AI and mark every last error, and we only shipped it when it was as safe as a human clinician. And so there was a lot of pieces that we had to kind of figure out to do this.
Perfect. Alex?
Well, we started back in 2014, and it was a cusp of a generative AI revolution, right? So Ian Goodfellow published the GAN paper, and we immediately started working on applying generative algorithms to discovering new drugs, so generating small molecules. And at that time, 2015, 2016, nobody even knew what generative AI was. So we had to pioneer this field. So the first peer-reviewed paper on generative chemistry, we published it in 2016, where we generated drugs, molecules against cancer from scratch using generative adversarial autoencoders. And since then, we kind of pitched this to big pharma, and at first people were aggressively skeptical, saying it won't work. But then later on, when we showed validation and some results, we were convinced, and now every single university, even lazy professor, has a AI drug discovery program. So another challenge that we had to overcome, so in our space, it's not ChatGPT. You have no idea if a molecule, if a model generated would work until you actually physically make it and test it. So we had to spend a lot of time and resources to go in the lab to experimentally validate the output of each single model. And every validated model, we included the model into the platform and built a platform which is currently being used by half of the top 20 big pharma companies.
Mahyar.
Yeah, so what did we innovate on? So we are at this very intersection of AI, hardware, and biology. Each of them very hard. When you combine them together, extremely hard. Actually, we hired from autonomous driving engineers. The reason is that, so remember, so we image these cells. They're flowing very fast, and based on the image, we decide where they should go. So imagine it's almost like a car driving in this micro road where you see all these particles, and you have to decide, okay, so this go that way, this go this way. So it's really an autonomous driving problem at the micro scale. So we had to do a lot of distribution of computation across different layers of GPU, FPGA, etc. And then each of those particles are these tiny, fragile, viable cells that if you mishandle, you lose the biology. So there was a lot of innovation at the intersection of all three that we had to overcome.
Interesting. Seems to me from kind of Munjal and Yar, the main thing that's not off the shelf is if you need the accuracy and you need the speed, you need to innovate yourself. You can't just buy it off the shelf, something that has lower the latency that you require and the efficacy that you require. Next question about regulation. We want to talk about FDA and CMS and all the bodies that regulate healthcare and biotech. Have they really kept up with the pace of innovation? Are they helping? Are they hurting? Maybe we start from that side.
Yeah, so historically, regulatory bodies have been behind the pace of AI. Well, I guess that's for everybody, right? We're all catching up with AI, but regulatory is especially slow. With that said, I mean, there has been some positive movements even over the last few months. You know, we saw FDA. They published this PCCP guideline January of 2025, where you know and there is this in the U.S. there is this bill in the Senate that is about the health tech, which is as recent as April. So there is a lot of movement, but it's still historically the pace of AI is faster than anything else that is happening around.
Yeah, I would say for FDA, I think what they're doing this year is pretty remarkable and pro-innovation. Right, on top of like recent announcements, we've also deploying like Gen AI platform across the organization. FDA organizations due to be completed by the end of this month. I think that was announced. And that would allow, importantly, to reduce the review cycles on drug discovery, drug development programs. So typically the bottleneck right now with the FDA is the review time, like process, right? How long does it take the FDA experts to review an application, to review a clinical trial results and provide guidance on what to do next to the pharma company? So this will have a chance of improving and accelerating the review cycle. So we'll have the more rapid turnaround process and more rapid progression of clinical trials.
Yeah, one of the reasons we picked our agent's focus to not be a doctor and to not diagnose is that keeps you out of the clinical decision support requirement within the FDA. So that was one thing. But second, even if it hadn't, the FDA today is, having met with Dr. Oz on the CMS side, but as well as RFK, they're very forward-leaning on AI, both of them. I mean, extremely forward-leaning. So I think in the US, at least, there's a very pro-AI administration that's making it easier and paving the way for a lot of easier time. But I think on the flip side, in Europe, the EU AI Act is just a total nightmare. Like, here's Europe thinking, we're going to regulate first before we even understand what the thing is. And I'll give you an example. So if we add one feature to our AI agent, it's actually going to make it the highest risk within the EU AI Act. And that feature is that it senses the emotion of a patient and reacts. So you don't want my nurse to say, my AI agent to say, to be able to tell the difference between you saying, my back hurts and my back hurts. Because those are very different things, and the agent should absolutely notice the difference. But if I make it do that, it's now the highest risk, requires the highest approval. And I think they just weren't thinking or understanding the issue when they made these regulations. And oh, by the way, the fine is 7% of worldwide revenues, and it's written so vaguely, you're almost 100% going to trip it. And so you look at all these things, and you're like, so I've had so many clients come to me, they're like, can you please deploy your product in Europe? I'm like, no. I'm absolutely not going to deploy it in Europe. When you guys change this law, give me a call.
Something that I was reading about recently about FDA and about them kind of being pro-AI, there's hundreds of thousands of submissions to the FDA every year from medical device manufacturers, pharma. And at this point, just because AI is helping create so many different things, they are also having problems kind of just parsing through all the documents that comes in. So they are starting to kind of apply AI on FDA's term to actually be able to parse through all these documentations and submissions.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, it is. I think it's pretty good. Now we want to talk about AI and a little bit of the hype and reality, right? What do we think AI can actually change in healthcare, in biotech, in diagnostics, in your basically area of expertise? And then what do you think it can probably never touch or not touch in the next 10, 15 years?
So I know this is going to be an interesting comment, although not surprising, I guess. I think generative AI, in at least the use cases we're looking at, is probably underhyped. And the reason I say that is, when you look at nursing in the US, there's a huge shortage. And so you could say, I'm going to come in, and we're going to help solve some of that shortage. But the really big idea is not just doing things you do today, right? When the cost of something drops 10x or 100x, you do novel things you never did before. So for example, in the next heat wave in the US, we're going to be reaching out to every single one of these 200,000 patients that this one health plan has identified that are at risk. We're going to call them. We're going to do a heat stroke triage. We're going to call an Uber then and get them to a cooling center if they're having issues. We're going to do that at the hottest 2 hours of the day, every single day of the heat wave. Now, you could never do that with humans. You literally couldn't. You'd have to find 50,000 nurses to call people at the hottest 2 hours, to call 200,000 people at the hottest 2 hours of the day with what, 5 days, 10 days advance notice of a coming heat wave? And it would cost you $5 million to $20 million to do that every single day? Well, are you really going to save that much money on ER admits? Probably not. But with AI, you can do it for $200,000 a day. In fact, in the next generation NVIDIA chip comes out, it'll maybe be as low as $50,000 a day. And that's at our retail price, not even at like the true COGS underneath it. And so when you look at all that, you're like, my God, there's a level of outreach and care we can deliver that's amazing. Now, on the what shouldn't you do, I don't think we're going to get an AI doctor anytime soon. I think it's too hard. I think you're going to kill somebody. There's other areas that I don't think are safe to do it. We do not let our agents do mental health because it's quite ambiguous. You know, if I do a check-in call for a congestive heart failure patient, I know the questions I got to do. Is your ankle swollen? Did you gain more than 2 pounds? Like, there's a protocol, and if I follow it, I know I've done the standard of care. In mental health, it's pretty squishy. Oh, you said your dog died. Oh, you didn't follow up on that, and then therefore they hurt themselves. You know, you should have followed. Well, okay, it's not a clear protocol. We don't do any under 2 kids work. We don't do any high-risk pregnancy work. So there's like, you know, we don't do any hospice work. The very end of life requires a level of sensitivity that's extremely hard. In fact, I asked one of our team, I was like, ooh, you know, our AI struggled to do it. And they're like, don't worry, Munjal. Actually, 99% of nurses don't do end-of-life hospice work because it's also very difficult to do. And so there are some things we're learning not to do. But the biggest one is, I think we're a long ways from an AI doctor that we will all trust and the system will say is okay.
Interesting that we have solved empathy before the decision-making, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, diagnosis is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, if I asked everybody here, you know, raise your hand if you've ever been to a doctor who misdiagnosed you and you had to go to another doctor. Like, that's like almost everybody's had this experience. And so even the humans get it wrong a lot.
For sure.
Well, in terms of my opinion, what AI can do, right? We're in biotech, and we already show that AI can discover drugs faster and cheaper. Currently, if you take last 15 years, we have 50 drugs on average that are approved by the FDA. Like every year, 50 drugs. It's kind of plateaued. Whereas we have thousands of diseases without a cure. We have a rapidly aging population. And because of that, we have a rise in incidence of chronic disorders. Despite all the advances in cancer treatment, we have more cases of cancer globally, and it is increasing just because people live longer. So we'll have a very kind of challenging prospect in front of us. So we'll have to face the music at some point, right? And address this challenge. So AI offers us an option to accelerate the drug discovery process and discover more medicines, not only therapeutics, but also preventative solutions, right? So you have both like the shield and the sword to tackle that challenge. So AI can already like provably, demonstrably accelerate that process. Now, in terms of what AI cannot do, I agree that some of the kind of morally challenging issues like reproductive health decisions, end-of-life decisions, but those decisions will be made by humans. Some of the aspects related to empathy, although AI can love you unconditionally, right? So like it's the best kind of love you can get from AI. It's still, in some cases, it will fall short and will have kind of downside. And also, AI cannot control anything that relates to like politics, right? And socioeconomic decisions that are made by people, by politicians in the healthcare space. So it cannot really improve something that it cannot control. So I think morally laden issues and socioeconomics, politics related in healthcare would not be touched by AI.
Yeah. Let me ask a follow-up question there. So AI is helping us generate thousands of prospects for drugs, right? You increase the top of the funnel, they go through the different stages of the clinical trials. At the end of the day, you still need vet labs and animal studies and human trials, right? And that's the part that AI can't necessarily create more humans for trials or find more patients for trials. Do you think AI can actually help us get there too, or we are going to have lots of, a huge pipeline which kind of gets blocked when we need human testing?
Yeah, currently have 99% failure rate in drug discovery and drug development, right? So it's one out of 100 cases, they succeed. So if you just increase the hit rate with AI, you will be able to overcome this challenge. If you get 10 out of 100, it will already increase the number of approvals tenfold. And speaking of a scale, we have shown that in order for us to discover a developmental candidate, the molecule that will go into humans, we need 10 times fewer molecules to be synthesized than required conventionally. Right? For our lead molecule, we synthesize less than 80 molecules to generate a clinical candidate. So I think that kind of precision and multi-parametric optimization that AI allows us to perform will increase the hit rate and ultimately will increase the number of approvals per year.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of what is underhyped, what I'm most excited about is the following. Over the past couple of years, we were amazed by how ChatGPT became so articulate and told us stuff that we never thought AI could do. Or generating voice, or recognizing faces, all the classic problems. Remember, those are the problems that we are evolved to do well. What we're not evolved to do well is understanding the DNA sequence, understanding the gene expression of our cells, understanding how the cells look like. And right now, over the past couple of decades, we have built tools to be able to read all that data. Now imagine you take that fire hose of transformer architecture and everything that fed LLM inside to our bodies, and let our body, all that data that we can read, feed a kind of model. I think this is entirely underhyped. Because all of a sudden, we would have a super intelligence. We're talking about when we arrive at super intelligence, we can have super intelligence today with the methods of understanding our entire biology. And that's what I'm super excited to do. In terms of what we cannot reach, I kind of agree. The decision making, well, for two reasons, especially around the health, around the AI doctor, is a little further. One is, we are all control freak. We can't really hand off decision making. Even if the AI is a legit doctor, we cannot just hand off the decision making to that. B, we don't really have a good way to detect biases and all the stuff that could go wrong in the underlying model. And we don't have a way to ask good questions about, explain how the AI does. Imagine if we ask the AI doctor, why do you came up with this diagnosis? And it gives you 100-page explanation. Is that going to be usable for a human? No. And imagine based on that diagnosis, you have to make a decision of, am I going to prescribe this pill or this drug, this critical drug to this patient or not? Nobody has the time to read that 100-page description. So I think for those reasons, it would be very hard to have an fully autonomous AI doctor anytime soon.
Thank you. Data, your AI models, or your distribution. The question is which one, and you have to pick one, right? Is the reason your company would remain successful and basically have defensibility modes? Is it data that matters, your AI models that matters, or your distribution?
The second. AI models.
Your AI models, interesting.
Everybody thinks, if I just have, he who has the most proprietary data is going to win building the best model. Not really.
No?
I mean, we had 10 billion tokens we got from health system partners. We got another 6 million calls of patients talking to that. I mean, pretty good proprietary data. It turns out these models are trained on the whole internet. They kind of know everything. And in fact, when you train them too much on data, they kind of they overfit pretty fast. And so I don't think it's data the way people think. I think that's like a leftover from classifier AI days where the AI knew nothing until whatever data you gave it to train. But here it's been pre-trained, right? That's the beauty, right? GPT is generative pre-trained transformer. It's pre-trained. And it's pre-trained on the whole internet. And so I think that people have not realized, like every time we think, oh my God, we're probably going to have to train on that, we ask our model and, oh, it's already in there. I don't know where it came, but it's in there somehow. So I think that's the part. I mean, I think distribution in this market doesn't really help you because people are very interested ultimately in having the best, safest product. So at least for what we're doing, safety matters so much, but I don't think that's always the case. Like, you know, if I'm trying to use generative AI within my Google Docs, and maybe there's a 5% better if I actually use OpenAI directly versus the Gemini that's already built in, I'm just going to use Gemini. It's close enough. I barely have to click a button. It's like half there. It's even suggesting things on the side. Versus OpenAI, I got to take the whole thing, paste it over here, take that result, put it back in. Maybe that changes the formatting. I got to fuss with the formatting. I don't have the time. It's not a big enough delta for that. But I think when it comes to safety, it matters. Because even if our product is 99.9% safe and the next product's 95% safe and it's half the price, you still get fired for killing how many people in that 4%, right? So, I mean, I think that for us, the model's safety, i.e. the model itself, matters the most.
Interesting. That's probably one of the more counterintuitive responses that I've heard, that the models matter more than data. But
I know, everybody says this data thing. I'm like, dude, that was true. The old classifier models were idiot savants.
Yeah.
They knew only the one thing you trained them, so yes. But this thing kind of knows everything.
Great to hear. Alex, how about in drug discovery? Data, models, or I don't know how to define distribution in the kind of market trials. Maybe it's your vet lab or patient recruitment or clinical trials.
Yeah, I would say in drug discovery in general, it's also the model, but the model that the algorithm plus the overhang that is required to train the model, like we see in DeepSeek, reinforcement learning pipeline. So those modules that assess the quality of the model's output and provide feedback back to the model, those reward components are extremely important. That allow DeepSeek to train so efficiently. For drug discovery, we developed hundreds of those reward models that provide feedback in the reinforcement learning loop back to the model and allow it to train. In some edge cases, however, where we're talking specifically about domain-specific foundation models, there the data can be even more important. But just in the specific foundation model cases where we're dealing with extremely nuanced data type. But in general, I think model itself is the core thing.
I guess I have the boring answer. For us, it's the data. So today we have the largest data set of single cells on the planet, 3 billion plus images of single cells. But that's not what matters. We've painstakingly have gathered that and will publish this first foundation model. But the more important piece is that every single customer of us that runs our system adds to our data set and adds valuable annotations to our data set. And that data flywheel is what matters, because even if you have the largest resources of the biggest companies in the world, you cannot keep buying your data. You have to find a way that you get paid while you're gathering your data, and that's what matters for us.
Very cool. AI is bringing the cost of intelligence low. Basically, human intelligence cost is going super cheap. What emergent use case does it enable, do you think, in the world of healthcare, or just even outside of that? What does cheap intelligence mean for the future of the world?
So, I mentioned it earlier when I talked a little bit about the heat wave use case, but I think for the first time in human history, we're going to be able to get to true healthcare prevention. That this abundance of healthcare workers, right? Because I have an infinite supply of workers at almost zero cost. And I can finally reach out to every patient with whatever frequency I need to do. And the ideal staffing in the world, like in the US, there's 360 million people, and there's about 5 million RNs. But the ideal ratio is probably 360 million RNs for 360 million people. That probably yields the best outcome. But we can't afford that, obviously, and not everybody wants to be a nurse. I mean, there's like many things that don't work. But with abundance, we can finally do it. So there's a saying of, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The problem is it's actually the reverse. A pound of prevention is worth an ounce of cure because the cost of intervening has been so high and such short supply. And now I think for the first time in human history, we have this ability to check in with every patient every day if we want. My mother, God, was recently diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and she ended up going to the hospital with a blood pressure of 230. And when we got there, we were like, how did this all of a sudden happen? And her doctor looked up in her medical record and was like, oh, actually, your mom's been on a blood pressure lowering medicine for the last 5 years. I'm like, what? Because when I talked to her, she was like, oh, I saw the doctor. He said, for my age, I'm the healthiest woman he knows. I mean, she just totally told her family that she was totally fine when in fact she had this. And she didn't take it, and she didn't get refills. And sure enough, 5 years later, she ended up with mild CHF. And I'm like, God, I wish the doctor had called her, because he's the only one that knew because of US HIPAA laws. If she doesn't tell us, we don't have any other way to know. And as a child, you feel so awful. You're like, oh, my mom was there for me, and I can't be there for her. What should I have done? I should have checked. You feel so guilty. But really, the doctor could have called her. He could have said, hey, you didn't forget your refill, ma'am. Are you still taking the blood pressure? It's really important that you take, can you take your blood pressure for me right now? And they could have done that every single week for the last 5 years, and we might have avoided this. That's the power of what this abundance is going to deliver for us. And I think all of human history, we've been thinking about healthcare has been premised on scarcity. I think you go 4,000 years ago to ancient Greece, we did not have enough healthcare workers. So even the word triage assumes scarcity. And I think this shift to abundance is a massive paradigm shift that, honestly, we've never done before in healthcare.
Well, in terms of productivity on our side, the program I mentioned, lung fibrosis program, to get from zero to preclinical candidate to actual molecule, it took us cost-wise around $2.5 million US dollars. The industry average is in hundreds of millions to get to a developmental candidate. So we show almost 100-fold a decrease in cost of the underlying kind of drug discovery efforts. And since we started working on the pipeline since 2019, we have been able to nominate 22 candidates, clinical candidates. So just to put it into perspective, a typical pharma, big pharma, with tens of thousands of workers in R&D, generates 4 or 5 candidates a year, right? So with AI, we're able to kind of match your productivity, and even in some cases, exceed the productivity of big pharma players. So I think the abundance in terms of AI, it's already here. We just need to accelerate further, start more programs for those thousands of indications that are unmet, and also preventative options. So we want to prevent diseases from happening, and both prevention and treatment are essential pieces of that, and AI can help with both.
Thank you.
One thing I'm very excited to see is finally we're gonna pay attention to rare diseases because of abundance of intelligence. We have this expression in the field variants of unknown significance. What does that mean is, well, there is a variant in your DNA, but we don't know how significant it is. And I think, and in general, how does the science work? It's all pattern recognition, and it's a fat tail power law distribution. And what we can do as a scientist is to just look at the early part of it, to look at everything that fits within our attention, our lifespan, our time in the lab. With AI being available and being abundant and being centralized, We could look at the fat tail. We could look at everything that so far we've been ignoring because they're just too rare. We don't really care. So I think that's a big shift in the entire healthcare.
100%. So we have about 2.5 minutes. We're going to do a lightning round. Very quick answers. Question number 1. What is one healthcare, biotech, or diagnostic problem you wish someone else would attack?
I don't want another COVID. So I love an AI that tells me, hey, like, this is radar for the next pandemic.
Yep, pandemics.
I would say data sharing, clinical data sharing across institutions. Currently, like data generated in silos in hospitals, and very few countries have developed a centralized solution. So I would really like AI to help with integrating healthcare data across countries on a global scale.
I think that there's a novel set of preventative things we haven't even thought of because we've never had a cost of an agent be zero. And I actually think, I hope, and it's a creativity limitation. Mm-hmm. So it's not that, it's like we have to think of whole new things we never thought of before. And I'm hopeful, honestly, lots of smart people will figure that out.
What is one startup cliche you never want to hear again?
Well, I think those companies who just say, well, we have a lot of data, we're going to sell it to, I don't know, pharma, sell it to X, and they're going to figure out what to do with it. I think that's just, like, if you have data, you have to know what to do with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Plus, maybe one like cliche that I think, well, one can adjust is just putting more focus on total available market and making it as large as possible. I think this should be a very narrow market that for a startup to begin with, right? So TAM, it should be very focused, and you shouldn't grab like a large TAM number.
Thin wrapper companies will fail. Every VC ran around with this. Sam Altman was like, oh my God, thin wrapper company is going to fail. And then Cursor?
Yeah.
Like what?
Complexity.
Yeah, so I mean, if you have perplexity, you're like, huh, did you just say that because you didn't want anybody to start those? Because it certainly turned out to be dead wrong. Yeah. I mean, we're doing more than that, but it's shocking how much just a little bit of specialization really, gives you, like the other day I was playing around with new haircuts, and there's an app that does that great. Now, yes, I can do it in the horizontals, but actually the app that does it just good. It's just better. And I think that a little bit of specialization just makes a big difference.
Amazing. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for the great discussion today, guys. I hope AI can, help solve rare diseases, generate more drugs and molecules, and then help deliver healthcare to everyone in the US and abroad. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.